Hi everyone, this is your host Jawad of Kingdom of Dreams podcast. In today's episode, I have Antoinette Messam, a costume designer who has worked on various films, including Creed. But today, she's here to talk about the Book of Clarence. The film tells the story of Clarence, a struggling man who gets captivated by the rising Messiah, and that changes his life completely. It's an adventure, religious slash comedy, a really well shot film from a cinematography standpoint as well, and costume, of course, which we're going to talk about. I really had a great time talking to her. Here's my conversation with Antoinette Messam. I came across Book of Clarence about a little while ago. I saw a poster somewhere. I mean, there was just something that was there and didn't really think much of it. And then when I was reached out by your agent, Janine, or Samaya was, we I saw the film and I was not expecting it to be the way it was. It was kind of like, I don't know if you remember Leonardo DiCaprio's Romeo and Juliet, like back in the
Yeah,
day, in that
yeah.
kind of a tone. But just the visuals and the costumes and the set were so, they were not hidden. They were just so out there, like, with the wider shots and everything. And I really enjoyed it. I thought it was really cool and something
Oh,
different. I've seen. Yeah.
thank you. I wish more people would watch it. You
Yeah.
know, it's one of those things where I remember doing a podcast a few months ago, and the person who I know through the industry, he's does a lot of costume panel as a moderator. He
Hmm.
said, "Oh, I was wary of watching it. I just, shy away from the religious stuff." And I'm like, I'm glad you got past that because if once he watched it, he really liked it and loved the as like you said, the visuals was just eye candy for him. So I'm happy that I'm trying to get more people to take a chance with it.
Yeah. It's interesting you took you said about that religious thing, right? And it's weird that how we live in a time now where that's something that people sort of frown upon. Because
Hmm.
at the end of the day, it doesn't matter whether you believe in something or you believe in something different or not. At the core is story, right? At the core,
Hmm.
it's a story. Yes, Passion of the Christ was one of the most highest grossing movies of all time when it came out.
Hmm.
Um, but it's just fascinating how as a society our thinking evolves and changes. And I get to some extent sometimes some movies are a little too over preachy, but still there's, story. But this one certainly isn't. Um, and you mentioned, I wish more people see it. What I would recommend that you see, and I was just talking to a music composer of this film called Exhibiting Forgiveness.
Hmm.
You probably have never heard of it because I had never heard of it either.
No.
Uh, uh, I was going to watch it on my iPad while I was, doing my work and everything, and it started and it hooked me. I'm like, I can't do this, so I had to watch it at night. And a father and son relationship and a mom relationship. It blew me away. I highly recommend that you watch that. It's a great film.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm just going
No,
deviating.
and that's okay because this is the season where you're trying to squeeze in films that you normally would not, one, have the opportunity to watch. Like I'm an Academy member, so trying to get out to see some international films while they're available to us instead of
Yeah,
waiting till it comes on Netflix or something, you know? So I'm
yeah.
always open to getting ideas. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, getting back to your work and your career, you've worked on a lot of different films, including Creed,
Mhm.
which is the extension of the Rocky series. Um, just to kind of, being in the industry myself, I'm always curious about everybody's journey, how they
Mhm.
start, why they started, what they started. So what's your sort of catalyst for being who you are today?
Wow. I mean, I didn't, I sometimes think I came in through the back door, you know. I was a stylist. My career path led me through fashion,
Mhm.
that was where I thought I was going to be. I've even had a clothing line, but at a point when my son was very young, I wanted something a little bit more stable, and someone recommended with my experience, I could be a buyer in film. And, what I was looking for was a steady paycheck, not the terms that come with, fashion jobs like commercials and music videos. Sometimes you're waiting 30, 60, 90 days to get paid. And with a toddler and babysitters, I needed a regular paycheck. And someone recommended I buy for in film, and I reached out to a few designers, and one of them, who became my mentor for the next several decades, um, she hired me as her buyer and then felt I had the experience and the style to recommend me for a TV series that MTV was doing in Toronto. And it was their first drama series in the early 90s. And I'm saying early 90s, like 92. And that was my first job as a costume designer. I mean, I'd done music videos and a few commercials before that, but that was when I had to read a script and break it down and think about the story and how I was going to dress someone to do all the beats that it required. It's not just like standing there in front of a Ford pickup looking cute. I needed to have them get up, leave their house, go meet somebody, have conversation, spill something on their clothes. All those things came in, and it was an incredible learning curve. And I was so thankful now for the people who had patience with me, because I literally whoop went up to the top, was the costume designer. But then after that, I went back and I did set and I did the truck. I just wanted to get a better, I mean, it's
Sure.
one thing when you're a designer and you're going on to set and you're establishing and helping your actors feel comfortable and all that. But I wanted more experience to organize the truck for a movie or a
Yeah.
TV series, to be able to address anything that came up on set with talent. Monica Schnarr dropping a chocolate fudge piece of cake down the front of her dress, stuff like that. And it was good because I then continued to design, and in between in my early days, did stuff to kind of get more well-rounded experience, if you want to call it that.
Sure.
Yeah.
What series was it in Toronto that you were working on? Do you remember?
It was called Catwalk. It was for MTV, and um it is on IMDb. It was hard find, but it is on. So YTV, a Toronto production
I
company.
know. Yeah, I'm from Toronto. I know exactly what YTV
Oh,
is.
you do? So
Yeah, yeah.
YTV did season one, and then MTV bought season two, and MTV said, well, we don't want a costume designer. We want someone who's a stylist, because Catwalk was about a band that was in New
Yeah,
York, but they shot it in Toronto.
Toronto.
Back
That
in, the 90s, everything was shot in
yeah.
Toronto for New York, cheaper.
Toronto, yeah. No, I know. It's funny you mentioned YTV because I had just moved to Canada in 1990 and I was a teenager. So YTV was one of those kids channels.
Yeah,
And it was like always one of those channels that I would flip between. I don't even think it exists anymore. I mean, I haven't had cable in 20
I
years, but
don't think so.
yeah, it was like the go-to channel kind of for all the edgy, fun, quirky kid stuff. And
Yeah.
but yeah, I haven't heard that name in a long time, YTV. Good to hear that.
Well, now you understand what I speak about, because you've lived in Canada and lived and not even just Canada, my hometown, Toronto.
So Toronto is your hometown.
Yeah, that's my hometown.
When
Yeah,
did you
that's
move
where I
out?
grew up. Hmm?
When did you move out of Toronto?
I left Toronto around 2007. Um,
Okay.
I and then immediately went to LA and booked Orphan and came back to Toronto, But the director didn't know I was Canadian at the time. But
Yeah.
yeah, so mid to late 2000s, and then I'd say if anyone asked me when were you official, I was official around 2011. That's when I got my green
Mm,
card and um, leased a place and moved everything up from Toronto here, only to leave it here while I jump on a plane and go somewhere to go work.
yeah, yeah,
So
that's how it works.
yeah, I'm based here, put it that way.
And where were you in Toronto? Which area?
Downtown. I had a house at just on the border of Little Italy and Little Portugal. So do you know where
Danforth?
Bloor and Ossington is?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And then you walk south and you're in um College Street. And so I was right at like Roxton Road between Bloor and Roxton. If I
Mm,
walked, if I walked east, I'm at Christie Pitts. And if I walked west, I'm going towards Dufferin Mall. So it's right in the middle.
amazing.
Yeah, it was a
Yeah,
great place for my
it
son
was
to
a
grow
great, I
up.
mean, downtown has changed so much now. I used to go to Ryerson, which is not even
Yeah.
called Ryerson anymore.
Yeah.
But I remember going to Uptown Movie Theater, which I'm sure you know very well
Yep.
about,
Yep.
on Bloor and Young. That was my favorite movie theater, and they got rid of it, I think, 10 years ago or
They
so.
got
It's
rid of so much great.
yeah.
I mean, what was that incredible record store that was
Sam
right
the
in
Record Man.
and the Record Man? And I knew it was over when Honest Ed's went, which was
Yeah.
where we all went as, growing up, my parents would go to Honest Ed to
Oh,
stock
yeah.
on basics, you know?
It was a hangout place like Costco almost.
Yeah.
They
Right?
do have this on Young and Bloor, it's not Young and Dundas. There's on Victoria Street where Ryerson is, in one of the buildings on the top, they have a label Sam the Record Man. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's the headquarters or what, but yeah, that main store where all the records were, yeah,
Yeah.
they took it out a long time ago. Well, that's good to hear that you're from Toronto,
Yeah.
and going back to Book of Clarence, what was the journey behind getting on that film and what excited you? I mean, obviously it's a period piece. That's one reason for the interest, but just walk me through that. What kind of began that journey?
Well, it's interesting you said the period piece is what interested me. It it is interesting. And I remember that at the time when it was like all I could think of is I know I'm a former stylist, but I can do period. And it's like pushing to get period work. And now I'm doing period work. It's like, you guys, I can do other things.
Yeah.
But I got a call from James Samuel. I loved what we did together on The Harder They Fall, and I accepted the job before I even read the script. I trusted him. It's like if James wrote this, it's going to be cool. And then I read the script and I'm like, this is cool. This
Yeah.
is cool. Our schedule is insane, but this is, pretty incredible to think about just some of the beats, and he writes with music. So there was music interjected in the scenes. So it kind of took you into, especially if you knew the music, and we have similar tastes. He does a lot of reggae, a
Mm,
lot of soul music. And this one is a little bit more jazzy than The Harder They Fall. But, if I didn't recognize the name, I'd pull it up on YouTube and listen as I was reading. So it was really nice. It was a lot bigger than the edit you saw on film. It was like, whoa, how much money do we have? And then also too, just being excited to go someplace I'd never worked before, which was Italy. Like, how could I say no to that? And it was an
yeah.
incredible experience. I loved my crew. Matera is probably one of the most beautiful, beautiful places I've ever been in my life, you know.
I'm glad you mentioned that because I was gonna ask you because I didn't have a chance to look up where it was shot. It felt a lot like Middle East, but
Yeah.
it had a little bit of Sicily feel to it, minus the color of the walls because Sicily's more like, darker color bricks and everything. But yeah, it was a beautiful location, and like I said, I think what really caught me into the film as I started watching it was just there was this new series that was out by on Amazon Prime. It was about gladiator times. It's called the Things That We Die For. I don't remember the name of the exactly. Ronald Emmerich, who's directed Independence Day and stuff. He did it. and the special effects for that were so terrible. They were like chariot races, and
Yeah,
you could see the background being blurred, and you could see it was just like a screen. It wasn't even like done properly. Kind of like the old days. But when
yeah,
I saw the opening of this, and I felt I was right there in the middle of that town
yeah.
because it was just done so authentically.
It was done authentically and practical.
Yeah, of
There
course.
was
That's what I meant.
VFX. There was VFX, don't misunderstand.
Yeah.
We shot all of that. And that was the first thing we shot because we had Benedict Cumberbatch for 2 weeks right off the top. So from the first day of camera for 2 weeks, and then he was out. So we shot
Mm,
the chariot with him almost getting run over, and we shot all the crucifixion stuff with him on the hill and going through the town, like literally because his character walked through every set. The first 2 weeks we established so much. It was incredibly stressful, but we did it.
yeah. How big is your team on that film?
Wow. It was a big team. I'd say easily base 20 people, upwards to 35 on big background days. And then, of course, when we added second unit, that was a whole other team doing second unit.
Mm,
I was talking to my set supervisor and just getting names of people that I wanted to just give a shout out to. And when she's like, oh, this person handled the Romans and this person handled the people on in the background. And it was just like, wow, I didn't remember we were that big. But yeah, I'd
yeah,
say average about 30 people.
right. It in terms of inspiration, right? Like, yeah, we talked about this a little bit earlier. Like, it's a period piece and everything, and there's so many references through books and through other movies, or just historically. What did you sort of dive into any kind of particular research in trying to get the authenticity of the costumes, or did you improvise in any way?
All of that. All of
Okay.
that. I mean, I started researching as soon as I got the script, and I not only myself researching because of the time we had I mean, that was incredibly short prep for the size of the project. I had to enlist help. Like I said, my mentor Delphine White, and she passed away like 9 months after. But the last thing she did was help me do research on that project. And while I was on the plane, I was reaching out to Western Costume Reference Library, asking them to research the Romans for me. And so I'd know the different ranks and what the costumes would look like differently. Who's Pontius? Can somebody, like research that person? Then my assistant, I'm like, okay, let's connect. I get off the plane at this time, meet me here. Let's knock out the research because I basically had a few days before I had to turn around and get on a plane and go to Italy. And I wanted to have a lay of land so I know how much I was able to get in Italy and if I'd have to bring in anything from anywhere else. So researching, so I understood what it was, the silhouette I was looking for. Um, Having an idea of, and then getting an idea once I hit the ground and go into the rental houses to see what they had gives me an idea of how much I have to make and how much money do we need to do it. So research is one of the first things I have to do for so many reasons. One, just to wrap my head around visually what we were doing, and second, where was I going to get this and could we afford it,
Yeah.
in that
And
order.
in terms of like, making like actually making something into renting it, something like that, does that ever, in general, not particularly this film, does that ever happen on location? And
Absolutely.
and
Absolutely.
how do you overcome that, like in terms of time constraints and budget constraints and all that? Because it's challenging
It is,
being on the set myself. I've gone through that, so that's why I'm asking you.
it's challenging and it's different for each project. This this project, I was blessed to not only have some of the best rental houses in the world in Rome, which is where I prepped the movie.
Mm,
I prepped in Rome and then moved a couple of weeks before camera to Matera.
mm,
I was lucky to have some of the best cutters and stitchers in the world in Italy because they can sew.
yeah.
And knowing that with the time we had, I had to be very specific and concentrate on who I was making for. And because we were starting with stunts and with Benedict, my principal cast, all of their clothes are built because all of them required multiples. And even as we progressed, and the ones who didn't require multiples but had specific looks, like Mother Mary, Alfie Woodard, her costume was custom. Nicholas Pinnock, his costume, he was Jesus, was custom. So as we, as the background was predominantly rented, but I did have to, because I couldn't get enough for the amount of background that I had, because Italy was very busy, I had to have some made offshore in Thailand and
Mm,
shipped. So we rented from Spain. Um, so it had to come from multiple places. And at the same time, I was building, but I had to prioritize what I was building. I mean, I had a large shop. It started with, I think, 4 people, 2 cutters. And then by the time we got to Matera, we were full on production. I had at least 6 to 8 stitchers and 2 cutters, sewing 5, 6 days a week.
wow,
Yeah.
that's amazing. Can you recall I mean, it's, I think on a set every day is like that. There's always like chaos and there's a lot of stuff, moving parts and everything. Was there any kind of day that you can recall or certain situation where something took place that wasn't supposed to take place and you had to improvise and time was the issue? Any kind of behind the scenes story would be lovely to hear.
Wow. Well, he outed me on the live television, I think at the premiere. James McAvoy spoke of a mishap with his costume. And he played Pontius, which with research, Pontius is in white robes, very,
Mm,
Romanesque, very toga-ish. And it had the royal, I'm not sure if it's royal, but it had the color, the burgundy, which I think was status, like a senator.
yeah.
And he didn't want to wear that. He wanted to wear armor. But I spoke to him Thursday night. I was leaving Matera to fly to Rome to fit him Friday, and he was shooting Monday morning in Rome. So there was a unit move over the weekend. So I left Matera with them shooting the scene of John the Baptist. And basically, he flew from London and we were to meet in Rome the Friday. And he told me that night before, and it was like 9, 10 o'clock, that he wanted to wear armor. And first thought is like, where am I going to get armor at short notice and to fit him? And made a few calls. My background crowd supervisor was already in Rome fitting. I called her and I says, do you have any of the uniforms that I can at least bring something so he can see how he looks? She's like, no, she's already fitted them all. So we scrambled and we found something. But even without having had time to do research, I knew it wasn't quite right color-wise, but I just wanted him to try on the armor and see if this is still what he wanted to do once he got it on, because they're heavy, they're not comfortable, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, are you sure you want this guy? Wait till you put one of these things on and your legs are going to be bare and your arms are going to be bare and it's cold. But he put it on and he wanted armor. But then he had a little allergic reaction to it. So he's like, this one probably was on a horse. I gave him a little half a Benadryl, went away. He says, just make sure that it's not one that anybody's been near horses because I'm allergic to horses. So we were able
Okay.
to get into a rental house on Saturday, pull some options. And even with just thinking, okay, well, I've got 3 or 4 options. One of them will work. I reached out to the first AD and I says, you know what? If there's any way you can flip the scenes Monday morning, because what we decided is he would wear the the robes in the jail when he speaks to Clarence. And when
Mm,
he's with him, when he walks on water, he wanted to be in uniform, which was originally supposed to shoot first. If we could flip the scenes to give me time to fit him in the Roman attire and tweak anything, like shorten the underskirt or, do anything we needed to do to it while he was shooting the scene. So I gave the first AD and the AD department a heads up. This is what's going on. I had to tell the producers so everybody's aware. Monday
mm.
morning, he tries on the uniform. The one he liked had a massive allergic reaction to. And I'm not just talking he gets itchy nose and red. He goes beet red and his lips start to swell. Like everything that you could possibly say could go wrong when somebody's having an allergic reaction was happening to him. We had to get alert production right away. They had to get a doctor, get the doctor down. All of a sudden, the trailer he's in is surrounded by every producer and and I get a call from Jeymes, the director, saying, just change him, put him back into the robes. I'm like, he doesn't want to. He says, get them the EpiPen, wash the uniform. He wants to wear a uniform. We must have held up camera a couple of hours because they got to get a doctor in there. There was an ambulance standing by, give him the pen,
Wow.
wait for him to subside. And I had to give yesterday I had a live IG. I had to give a shout out to my set crew who handled it. Nobody panicked. His set costumer was in the trailer with him, had him wipe down, wash his face, all of that. Hands, everything, go and take all his clothes off, towel down. Doctor came, gave him a pen. We rushed the uniform to wash it and dry it and steam it, everything that we could possibly do to get any residue of horse out of it. And then we
Wow.
shot the scene.
That's, but tell me something. I mean, there's a captain of the ship and there's the producers and all that stuff. Shouldn't it, if you're trying to put a costume on that's not written in the script, or I get it, it's like a small thing, but sometimes things have a big, you know, con changing an outfit like that can result into something that might affect the story. Like, didn't it have to go through the director and the producer,
Well,
or
the director was at first, he was not keen on it because it wasn't written that way.
right?
But um, James McAvoy called him and they spoke about it and he explained the reasoning behind wanting to wear the Roman armor. He felt it would be more imposing. Well, you saw the scene. He
Yeah, yeah,
pranced around like, in that he didn't want something that was soft. He wanted it empowered him, he felt, right? And holding it, you see him holding it while he's talking, and he's going through all the actions and really making it very physical, using the costume for the beats. So I got it. I just wasn't prepared for it. And that's sometimes in the ninth hour when you have to pull it out. I mean, I found a uniform. It's just he happened to be allergic
yeah.
to it. And the studio they weren't on set a lot, but for James McAvoy and Benedict Cumberbatch, they were there. So there was a
Yeah.
studio exec there. 2 of the creative producers were there and our executive producer who managed the movie. So I had 4 producers outside of the trailer.
Well, James McAvoy is such a great actor, and so I can see he really dives into the character. I mean, one of his great performances, which was a shame that not even didn't even get an Oscar nomination, let alone an Oscar, was the movie Split. I don't know
Yeah,
if you've ever he played seven different personalities in that movie.
yeah.
But that again, it kind of a testament to his who he is as an actor and trying to be sure that the right moves are made. So
Oh,
kudos
he
to
was
him. But yeah,
he was adamant. That wasn't even an option. It was just finding the right one.
yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that. Um, what is it that you are working on next that you're able to discuss?
I just got back from Australia end of the summer. I was working with the Agbo brothers, and it was their first period film. And it was interesting because it was a pirate movie written by Frank E. Flowers, who he wrote One Love, the Bob Marley movie.
Mm-hmm.
And this was his directorial debut, and he wrote it and directed it. And Priyanka Chopra Jonas
Mm-hmm.
was
Mm-hmm.
the lead actress. And why is his name slipping me? He was in The Boys. The lead actor in The Boys was in there.
The big
And
guy with the beard and the
yeah,
I
yeah,
know what you're talking about.
the
I know
New
you're talking.
Zealand. Yeah,
Yeah,
sorry, my
that's okay.
brain.
What's the name of the film?
The Bluff.
The Bluff. Yeah, I'm just looking at
Yeah.
IMDb. I'll tell you his name in a second. Carl Urban. Urban.
Yes,
Yes.
Carl.
Yes.
Carl Urban.
Yeah.
We had so many day players. I apologize. But Carl Urban went head to head with Priyanka. And I also got to work with I- I- Imez Carlos Juna. She's in it's shot in New Zealand as well. It's sort of like the Ring of Towers. Is that it? The Ring? That fantasy series where he plays the
Oh,
another.
the Hobbit you're talking about?
Yeah, that one with the hobbits and all of them. He's in that series, and he was,
Mm.
yes, Imez Cruz. He was really great to work with. I love these movies where you have the leads, but then you have these characters that play smaller parts, but their character is so interesting and interesting to dress, where you really get to um play. Sometimes with as you said, with the, stars, there's a lot of input sometimes in what their costume is, but with these, um, smaller roles that have great character actors who talented, especially when I worked on the Book of Clarence and Lift with Kevin Hart. Some of these actors who came in for a few days, who've done the Game of Thrones and done all these really great projects in
Mm-hmm.
Europe, and they just bring their A game to the fitting. It's like, ooh, you're sharing with me. I'm learning something.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's a bag of mixed things, right? Like where you have, I think it's important to learn obviously from the pros, but sometimes working with, not necessarily smaller actors, but just smaller roles. It's a nice balance between them too. Like you're just, you're trying to get your expressive expression out there as opposed to being, sort of star power and whatnot, which sometimes it can work, but sometimes it can backfire too, I think.
Yeah, and it's interesting too with the star power. I mean, with this movie, because so few of the actors had done this genre before,
Yeah.
they a lot of them were coming with hope at wanting me to lead them. I mean, Benedict showed up and basically walked into his costume, which was fantastic. I think that was the most aha moment I had. I think my heart was thumping for days until he got there and literally put it on. But because he came so late and was going to camera very shortly after, like the next day, it had to be camera ready for him. So everybody's just like hoping,
Yeah.
praying everything would be great, and it turned out to be perfect. So
That's
I'm very
awesome.
happy with that costume.
That's really cool. Well, I'm really looking forward to the film that you just finished, the
The
Bluff.
bluff. Yeah.
I I think it is it probably next year, right? If you finish
Yeah.
in some summer,
I
yeah.
would be surprised any, like maybe second or
Summer
third.
next year. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot of action. I mean, it's Agbo Brothers. basically take, you know, Extraction and combine it with a period movie, and they had a baby. So
Mm,
lots of militant period, people in it. Yeah,
that's awesome. That's really cool. Well,
lots of
you know,
sword fight.
well, there was a Pirates of the Caribbean that was coming out a lot of time. It was very successful, and I don't think they'll make any. I don't think they will. Maybe they'll do a remake down the road with a brand new star cast. But I think that genre is sort of. It's been a while since there's been like a sword fight, like squashbuckling stuff, like Mask of
Yeah,
Zorro and Pirates of the Caribbean. So hopefully that market is something that this movie taps into and does well.
I think it might, but it's a little different. It's later. It's
I know,
about
I know. Yeah,
a
no,
little
yeah.
later than the Pirates of the Caribbean. And one of the things that they didn't want it to look like was Pirates of
Was
the
Pirates of
Caribbean.
the Caribbean.
Yeah.
Well, I'm talking about swashbuckling and swords, and I think people enjoy that as a form of entertainment. I mean, there's a whole sports out there for that too. So, but as long as a good movie, which I'm hoping it is, the story and everything. So, looking forward to that.
Well, I hope it will have more better luck than the Book of Clarence, I think that timing was bad when it came out. I don't think it came out at a good time, right in the, beginning of the year when all of the for your consideration movies are everybody's
Mm,
watching, excited to see what's going to be Oscar nominated. And it's interesting, I don't know if you knew this, but Book of Clarence and Lift came out on the same day. So I did both of those
mm.
movies in 2022, and they both came out January 12th, 2024 on the same day.
Wow. Wow. No,
Yeah,
a lot of times, I mean, you know it too. It's like all about you could make a great movie and it just may not be released or may
yeah,
not at the right time, may not have a good marketing behind it. I mean,
all
there's
of
so
that.
many variables, right? And sometimes, for the lack of better word, not so great movies do so well because the timing was right, right? So
Right? We won't call any names.
yes, yes, yes. I don't want to do that because nobody wants to make a bad movie. It just happens for many, many reasons, as you know, and everything. Well, thank you so much for your time and we're
Thank
doing
you.
the amazing work that you did on Book of Clarence. Really hope people go check it out. And we just live in a time where these movies like Book of Clarence and the other one that I was talking to you about, exhibiting forgiveness. If these movies had come out in the 90s or the early 2000s when the platforms weren't there and the market was different, they would do people would talk about them even if they didn't do well because that's just something like you discuss over, water cooler discussions at work and stuff. But it is the
Yeah.
way it is now.
Yes, especially when half the water coolers are working from home. You know?
Yes, that's a big part too, right?
Yeah.
You're right. You're right. Well, hopefully it will do better. And thank you again for working and thank you for speaking to me about that. I really appreciate it. Hopefully, we'll run into in Toronto maybe sometime whenever you're back.
Yeah, TIFF. Let's get together at TIFF. I always try to, if I'm not working, to make it home for the International Film Festival, Toronto International Film Festival. I miss it.
Yeah, let me know. I was there this year after a long time. I hadn't been there for a long time, and it was such a great thing because being in the industry, watching movies, I saw like 19 or 20 movies in 6 days.
Wow.
I mean, I was toasted by the end, but it was just that experience
Yeah,
of
yeah.
being around people who love movies, not necessarily directors and producers, but just audience as well. It's a great feeling, and hopefully we can catch Tiff next year.
Okay. Well,
All
thank
right.
you. And I
Thank you so
will
much.
look forward to seeing this when it's released. Bye.
All right. Take care. Bye bye.